Graham, the professor of Pirate football, now on the phone with us. And Josh, we figured we'd go ahead and put you on Talk of the Town. You've been on every other show that we have on our sister station, 94.3 The Game. And so we figured why not go ahead and have you make your inaugural Talk of the Town appearance this morning. Josh, good morning.
Good morning. It couldn't have been a better time to make my visit on Talk of the Town. I mean, it was a big win for the Pirates, and I'm still pinching myself because it's still kind of surreal to kind of talk about what exactly transpired at Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium Saturday.
I agree with you. I'm still. You look back on it, you think about it, you kind of you develop your own kind of hypothesis, if you will, about what took place, and you kind of have your own thoughts. And still though, it almost hasn't really sunk in yet. Just again, in the fashion that ECU won that game in such domination, 71-40. Josh, I don't think anyone expected that game to turn out exactly like that.
Nobody did. There's no way you could expect what we saw on Saturday. 789 yards, a school record, and then 70 points, an ECU record at Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium, only trailing the total they put up in 1959 against Newport News Apprentice School in 1959, 74-0 winners back about 50 or so years ago. So ECU had a historic performance, and it was against the flagship school in the state in North Carolina, and a team that has really had ECU's number leading up to last year's game in Chapel Hill. They led the series 12-2-1, and then the Pirates, of course, have won the last two games by an average of 26.5 points per game. So ECU, they may have been seen as the little brother the last couple of years, but little brother has grown up, and they've been winning these games and winning them big. And now the Pirates are ranked in the top 25 in both the AP and the USA Today coaches polls, and that's a good sign going into the bye week. They have a chance to decompress for a week and then prepare for SMU, who comes to town in 2 weeks.
And what's funny, Josh, talking about the bye week, I felt like for North Carolina, winning the first two games in the way they did, they got by San Diego State, they got by Liberty, games in which they were down in both of those games they had to rally to win. So I felt like for Larry Fedora in North Carolina, the bye week could not have come at a better time for them in facing this kind of offense with ECU. And now looking at ECU, I feel like this win could not have come at a better time for the Pirates now with a bye week off. So it kind of worked out in ECU's fashion as well in regard to the bye week. Josh, I do want to ask you about this. Before the game, we did receive the news. I'm not sure how much you can talk or say in regard to this, but we did receive the news that outside wide receiver Cam Worthy had been suspended for 2 games as a result of a school student code of conduct violation. This action coming down, it was administered by the ECU's Office of Rights and Responsibilities during a review hearing prior to the game against North Carolina. Josh, were you privy of this information before Saturday, and how much can you tell us about the situation with Cam Worthy?
It was interesting and kind of eerie as well, because I was sitting in the press box at Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium, and then the sports information director at ECU, Tom McClellan, hands me a piece of paper that says Cam Worthy suspended an hour and a half or so before the game. And then I talked to him a little bit about it, and they said they knew there was a possibility that he could miss this game at around Thursday, and they tried to explore other options to kind of see if he could play against the Tar Heels and get him through to the open date, but that, as you know, was not going to happen, and it was based off a verbal dispute that took place just in the late summer period. It's kind of vague language, but probably happened some point during fall camp, and it was not an athletics issue. It, like you mentioned, it's something involving with the school, and I'm sure we'll learn more of the specifics in the next couple of weeks. Cam Worthy, a key player, 6 receptions and 224 yards against Virginia Tech prior to facing North Carolina. But looking at the positive side of things, Trayvon Brown, the true freshman from Wilmington, stepped in so nicely. 3 plays into the game, he gets his first start, by the way. He gets a 55-yard touchdown behind the Tar Heel defense. He ends up with 5 catches and 117 yards, 2 scores. So he played very well. It's yet another story and of a player stepping in and playing well for the Pirates on a given week.
That's a great point. I was going to bring up Trevon Brown, Josh, because before the game and when I received the news that Cam Worthy was not going to be playing, I admit, looking back at the way he played against the Hokies the week before and knowing the kind of impact he can have for this football team, he was a leading yards leader in receptions coming into the game, and that big 6'3" frame certainly was a difference maker that you and I talked about on the show on 94.3 The Game last week about the difference he made and just being a bigger player for the Pirates on the outside. I was a little bit worried. I thought that's one game changer that the Pirates would be without, but Trevon Brown, man, he came in and made the most of his start, played exceptionally well, returning kicks, catching the football, 4 kickoff returns, 93 yards, a career best, 210 all-purpose yards. I can't really recall, Josh, off the top of my head right now, a performance for a player that's stepping in for the first time, starting for a player who's been suspended or who couldn't play, that's had this kind of performance for ECU. Can you recall one?
I got one, Davon Grayson, his first game a year ago, not necessarily stepping in for suspension, but 3 touchdowns against Old Dominion, and Isaiah Jones was pretty good last year as well. But you do make a good point, but that's ECU, that's what they kind of preach when everybody has a story, as Ruffin McNeil said after the game, and things happen, whether it's Terry Williams and what he went through and the trials and tribulations to get back onto the field against Virginia Tech, and or with what happens with Cam Worthy. You have to find a way to respond. Trevon Brown was the best example of that response for the Pirates. And if you just look at this guy's frame, this guy is going to be quite the player for East Carolina. He is big, strong, fast, everything you look for in a player. Trevon Brown is. He was quite the basketball player as well in New Hanover High School in Wilmington. So he's going to continue to be effective. As for just the football side of things, we've talked about how key Cam Worthy was because of his frame and how he could stretch the field. Trevon Brown provides that as well, because you need to have those guys who can stretch that field and keep you accountable deep down the field, because you know what you have underneath with Justin Hardy and Isaiah Jones. So it just makes ECU's offense a lot more dynamic. And when Cam Worthy comes back after he serves the second game of his suspension against SMU, now you have another cog put into Lincoln Riley's already dynamic offense.
And Josh, it further solidifies how good this receiving core really is, and you're seeing other guys step up week in, week out. Big time game for Isaiah Jones this past weekend. We just talked about Trevon Brown, of course. Justin Hardy always has big games, game in, game out. But Bryce Williams coming in, making some big plays. So it just seems like every week there is a new receiver stepping up and making the plays and giving Shane Carden one more target to throw to. So that's something but a positive for ECU. Let's talk about this, Josh. I've heard so many people talk about why this game turned out the way it did and what really happened. But for me, I was telling Matt Engelbrecht earlier this morning in hour number 1, or actually during the break, I should say, that this for the first time for me in watching ECU play North Carolina, that you could look at these two football teams and clearly say to yourself, ECU has more talent than North Carolina. I felt like player for player, ECU, and I didn't really feel that way last year, Josh. I felt like man for man, North Carolina may have been more talented. This year, I do think from a talent standpoint, ECU, you got to give the edge to them.
See, I agree with you, and I think I was very clear on Saturday, but I think when that talent came to East Carolina and North Carolina respectively, you would look at North Carolina and say they had more talent. And I think it's a testament to what Jeff Connors does in his strength and conditioning program. It's a testament to what Ruffin McNeil and his coaching staff has done to get players prepared and get them acclimated to their system. And as for UNC, I kind of feel for Larry Fedora a little bit in what he has to face, because he has you can never do one thing as a coach. You can never blame your players when things go wrong. You can't just come out and say, well, my players are bad. For UNC, they had a lot of the same players a year ago who are lacking a particular skill that would be very useful to have, and that is tackling. 34 missed tackles against San Diego State, and they lost count against ECU on Saturday. So it's so difficult when you're unable to get stops on defense to win games, and ECU, they kept on going. 70 points, 789 yards later. And it's funny, Trent, all we talked about is the offensive side of the ball. On defense, Zeke Bigger won the Walter Camp Defensive Player of the Week National Award, the first time a Pirate has won the Walter Camp Player of the Week Award ever.
Great point, Josh. And Zeke Bigger, I tell you what, 17 tackles, 7 solo, that one pick. And for me, his interception there of Marquise Williams in the second half was the game-changing play. I felt like this game was going to be a game of momentum swings throughout. And that game swung the momentum to the Pirates, and they never looked back. And he just continues to play well. He's so active around the football, and I'm glad you brought that up. Again, the first Pirate being named the Walter Camp Defensive Player of the Week, getting that award for Zeke Bigger. And it couldn't go to a better guy, Josh. He's playing right now maybe the best football we've seen an ECU linebacker play in quite some time.
There's no doubt about it. And him and Brandon Williams play so terrific on at inside linebacker for Rick Smith and John Wiley, the inside linebackers coach. They're really just a ton of players who should be getting recognized nationally. Last week it was Josh Hawkins as the American Conference's Defensive Player of the Week. Zeke Bigger, as we just mentioned. You have Shane Carden, who gets it week in, week out. Justin Hardy. I looked up a number last night. Breon Allen, 4th in the country when it comes to yards per rush. 9.9 yards per carry for Breon Allen after his great rushing performance. And they call him fun stuff, or fun size, I should say, because he's small, but at the same time, he has that great speed and a great, he's one of our favorite guys to talk to as well, always a smile on his face. There's so many players on this team that could be given credit for what happened on Saturday. It's so tough to just look in one particular area because it was a true and the most purest form, a team win for the Pirates, and they all should deserve it because they certainly played the best performance I've seen them play in a long time on Saturday.
Yeah, for me too, Josh, and you're right. It's a total team effort by ECU, and there's not just one player that really sticks out or really one play. It was just everyone contributing at the right time for this football team, and when that happens, we've heard Coach McNeil talk about it and said after the game, that one heartbeat, one Pirate, one mind, things will be okay, that mantra, and it's so true, and that's how this team will play or has played at this point, and we hope will play moving forward. Now, Josh, looking ahead, of course, ECU off this week before hosting SMU in their inaugural American Athletic Conference game, and everyone, of course, talks about it, and you have to wonder what's going to happen now moving forward. But, Josh, when you look at this conference slate for the Pirates, I know that big game coming up on November 13th at Cincinnati is the game that sticks out to me, but is there one game on the schedule moving forward for you that you look at and you're concerned about now for ECU?
Yes, I think everyone wants to look at the Cincinnati and the UCF games as the two major games that the Pirates need to make sure they are prepared for. But I think just prior to the Cincinnati game, the game at Temple, that's one I think could be a little concerning at Lincoln Financial Field on the road. Temple is a pretty well coached team. They're a team that's had some success early on in the year, and then another one that just you look at the record of the team and maybe some of the numbers, you may think this might not be a close game, but I think the day after Thanksgiving on the road at Tulsa, weird things could happen in Oklahoma the day after Thanksgiving. And, of course, if you don't bring your game, you're not going to win games. And I think those are two outside of the Cincinnati and UCF games that could be potential trouble for the Pirates, be potential games like a year ago in New Orleans against Tulane.
I think it's a great point, Josh, and I'll piggyback your statement on that one because I said this a while ago. That game concerns me too because I think ECU will take care of business against Tulane. That Cincinnati game will be tough prior to the Tulane game, but ECU could be having so many. They're going to go into that game, I think, at Tulsa with so many emotions. You have UCF on the docket. You can't look ahead to UCF, and you have to wonder, will they look past Tulsa when I think they can easily get by Tulane? So it's going to be all about preparation that week and getting ready for the Hurricane. The Golden Hurricane. You make a long trip out to Tulsa, and you're right, weird things could happen, but it's all going to come down to, I think, preparation. The mental state will really be a factor in that game, too, for the Pirates. That's a game sandwiched in between an easy win and what's going to be a tough game with UCF to close the season. Like you said, that could be one of those quote-unquote trap games for the Pirates.
Plus, they'll have a lot of the Thanksgiving dinner inside them. I mean,
Yeah.
may overeat, maybe lack the
That's
expansive
right.
waistband. I don't know.
Yeah.
But those are certainly a lot of games that the Pirates need to get prepared for. But I think a lot of parallels are being drawn, and I've been on this since probably May, I would like to say. There are a lot of parallels between what ECU has done this year and UCF a year ago. They had a quarterback who was well known, or was known about, but not nationally relevant until their senior season. Blake Bortles, of course, going on to be the first quarterback drafted. Shane Carden having himself a great start to the season. UCF only loss, a 3-point loss at South Carolina, very respectable there.
Mm-hmm.
They went on in their first year in the American Conference to go 11-1, and then found themselves in the Fiesta Bowl and beat Baylor, of course. ECU, a lot of parallels with what UCF done. We'll see if they can continue to have success, and they do have a very favorable slate, as we mentioned, with SMU, South Florida, and UConn coming up next after the bye week.
Yeah, it could be that kind of year, Josh, for the Pirates for sure, and it could be very similar to what UCF saw a season ago.